Established in 1992, the New Zealand Student Loan Scheme was a policy response by the New Zealand Government designed to assist individuals by meeting a greater share of the cost of tertiary education. For many students, the scheme is a helping hand, as it gives students the opportunity to attend university that they may not have otherwise had. But for many students, it becomes a burden later on in life. Being alone, all the money borrowed by students must be repaid. However, there's a problem. Since 1992, the cost of tertiary education in New Zealand has become more expensive, and the average student loan has increased. 1992 figures showed the average student loan was $4,100, compared with $16,050 in 2012. As of the 30th of June 2012, there were 701,232 students borrowing under the student loan scheme, and total student debt had reached a whopping $13 billion. That's enough to buy everyone in New Zealand a beer at the pub every day for a year, or 4.8 iPads each. Reasons why students can't continue to pay more include that it has become harder for students to access student allowances. Only 1/3 of students are allowed the $171.84 payment per week. The remaining 2/3 must borrow $173.56 through the Student Living Cost Scheme or find other sources. Even so, these amounts are often not enough, as in many cities, rent alone is more than $170 per week. Last year, housing costs increased by 5.7% based on a 3-bedroom house. That's a $20 per week increase, and in some cities, such as Christchurch, costs increased by $50 per week. As a result of this, many students are struggling to make ends meet. From 2008 to 2012, university fees have increased by 4% each year. That's a total of 21.7% over the last 5 years. This is ahead of government predictions, and as a result, in the last 5 years, government investment in universities has only increased by 13.5%. Because of this, students have basically been paying more for less. As well as this, average gross debt has increased from $15,000 in 2010 to $18,000 in 2012. Reasons for this include it being harder for families to save for fees, with less than 15% of students being paid for by their families, and only 1 in 8 students having no debt when they graduate. Implications of increased average gross debt include 69% of students believing their loans will impact their ability to travel overseas, and 65% believing it will affect their ability to save for their future. Increased fees means increased repayment times. The average repayment time for a student loan is 8.2 years. However, some specialist degrees take even longer. On average, solicitors take 13.3 years, accountants 15.2, engineers 16.8, and doctors a massive 20.9 years. Many students doing these degrees have no choice but to borrow. Is this fair on them? Solutions to overcome these long repayment times can be made in 2 different forms: discount solutions and tax solutions. The discount solution is a lump sum, where a student travels into the bank and repays a significant chunk of their loan back to the government, say 20%. Following this 20% repayment, the total value of the student's loan will be decreased by not only the 20% repayment, but also a quick repayment discount of $300. Tax solutions include a tax bracket incentive for those who are working. Once working, each student is given a tax code depending on the amount of loan they still have to repay. These tax codes can be SL1, SL2, SL3, and SL4. These tax codes are split evenly into quarters relative to how much the student still has to repay. Once a student repays a quarter of their loan, they drop into the lower tax bracket of SL2. This will encourage students to pay back their loans faster, as once they repay a quarter of their loan, they will qualify for a lower tax bracket, meaning they will have more money in their pocket. To conclude, while the student loan scheme is an extremely helpful resource, it is still becoming more difficult to attend university due to increasing costs. As a result, graduates are being left with a large repayment burden which can greatly affect their life after university. Something needs to be done to decrease the burden and ensure that every New Zealander has the chance to attend university regardless of their circumstances.